It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, March 5th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is wondering if we have to worry about Sam Ersson.
We worried last year down the stretch.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. To keep up with our latest episode and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, and of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We've got trade deadline news and a proposal to talk about, as well as get to your mailbag questions. But the first order of business here is, of course, that 6-3 loss to the Calgary Flames last night. And a rough start to the game for Sam Ersson, ultimately leading to him getting pulled pretty early in the game.
Yeah, he never really got locked in. The Flyers defense was really loose at the beginning. It was a bad combination, and you could just see that things weren't going to start off well. After that first goal, you were like, things don't look great there.
Yeah, it was not pretty at all. And I think especially because it just came so quickly, right? That there just seemed to be absolutely nothing preventing Calgary from getting prime chances and then capitalizing on them. Now, Fedotov comes into the game and has a pretty solid performance, I'd say. 25 saves on 27 shots for the remainder of the game. And, at points it didn't feel like it, just because, again, I think the defense was still a little loose, and Calgary was getting a ton of scoring chances in this one. And it hadn't felt to me like for a while that the Flyers were getting outchanced like that. I mean, you look at, the way the numbers came out in the wash at the end of the game, scoring chances were 30-24 Calgary. And that just feels a little lopsided for the Flyers the way they've been playing recently.
Yeah, there was a speed deficit in that game for sure. You had Delorier in, so you can only use him certain amounts, so you're making other guys play more. We've talked about how they could get faster on defense. They don't want to do that, so they're going with this lineup, and it showed up against this team. Like, it always seems to show up against the Western teams. It does. It maybe it didn't in Winnipeg because the Flyers play really well there. But most of the time against these Western teams, it kind of shows up.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a fair point. I think obviously the other big thing that didn't come through here was the power play. Going 0 for 4 before that 6-on-4 and 6-on-5 at the end of the game that was ultimately unsuccessful. And man, it was brutal because they were getting chances there for sure. I think that, you look at the play of Michkov and Kuzmenko in particular, I thought they were doing everything they could, but it just didn't go.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, and finally they were used together on a line, which was good. But again, only because they were like in trouble. Like they should just be doing it when they're not in trouble. But the power play was like meh. But if they're practicing 6-on-4 and 6-on-5, they're still doing it wrong because they really could not gain possession. They're
Right.
And Calgary was smart about it. They weren't just going for the empty net right away. And they were smart about how they got the puck and where they put it, and the Flyers really could never gain control and make it a real chance to bring it within one. It never really got like that.
Yeah, I thought there were these little stretches of like 90 seconds or so where it looked like the Flyers were going to do that very thing and get control over it. You would have a really great shift from the Cates line, and then you would see Michkov and Kuzmenko come in and get some opportunities, but then Calgary would take it the other way, get a prime chance, and then they would control it for a while. And it didn't feel like the Flyers were going to have sustained pressure to
Right.
finally
That
punch
was the
one
key.
through, with Wolf in net playing
Yeah.
well, in
Wolf was
addition to
good.
all that.
He's very, he is fast. He's flexible. Wolf is a real good goalie. You could see, why he's having the season he's having.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously it was a very emotional game,
Yes.
for the guys. Just from your perspective, like how did it feel in the building and how did the tribute to Frost and Farabee go?
Yeah, played really well. People really cheered them. What we saw was Frost and Farabee. When they were waving, they were happy, but felt weird because they didn't know when it was going to happen. They don't have like a sense when it's going to happen. And I spoke to Morgan after the game, and he said he kind of nervously was waving because you don't know what to do, but he was really happy, and he was happy for him, and as he said, Beezer, and that's great because those guys are close. They almost got a goal. It got really close with the two of them on the ice.
Yeah.
That would have been fun for them. But it was one of those things you could tell it meant something to him. He was very honest and said he loved his time here. He said, I'm sure there were some fans that maybe weren't cheering for me, and that's okay. But he knows he still had a lot of fans here. But he also knew he had a lot of critics, and you feel bad about that. But whatever, that's hockey. It's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly was a fan of his and continue to be. I thought he, in particular, between the two, had a pretty good game there.
I thought they both
Obviously,
had good games.
yeah. I don't know. Like,
Well, here's the
I
thing
really
about
think it
Farabee.
was no. Let me talk about Frost first
Okay.
because I thought he had the better of the game of the two by far. He had 2 assists. He killed Sean Couturier on faceoffs. It was a huge, huge element to this game, and I think that was a really smart thing for the Flames to do to put Frost out there when they could against Sean Couturier because it was very obvious what was happening there, and I thought he was creating a lot more chances than Farabee. Farabee had some good shots
Well, that's
down
what I
the
was going to get
stretch.
at. Yeah, he had a couple of good scoring chances.
I don't think his gameplay was that good overall.
I don't know. I thought I saw him on the forecheck. I saw him making some decent plays. Mostly when they were in the end by me, I saw a little more. But I get what you're saying. I mean, Frost had a better game. There's no denying that. But Farabee had a couple of good scoring chances, especially one where he kind of knifed it down and it took an odd route to the net, and it was a hard save. I don't know. I think it was Fedotov that made it. But yeah, Frost was better. Actually, in a way, we've always trumpeted Frost's faceoffs, and Calgary
Right.
kind of like showed the Flyers that he's a good face-off guy.
Yeah, I think so. And, on the other side of the coin, didn't really see much out of Jacob Peltier in
Mm.
this game at all. But certainly Kuzmenko, as we've talked about, was a
Yes,
big presence here and had a real solid game, got the goal, which was nice for him,
it
I'm
was.
sure. And so I think, despite losing the game, I think Kuzmenko, of the four of them, probably had the best game overall.
Yeah, he had a nice, shot. There was some deception on the shot, so it was a really good goal. And yeah, he had a really good game. No question about it. After the game, I saw he was in the hallway. I think Michkov was with him. They had a bunch. There seemed to be a little Russian contingent kind of talking.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
As far as other players in this game, I would say that another kind of growing issue is the lack of production from Travis Konechny, and you could see that he's frustrated at the
Oh yeah.
moment. That there's something happening there where he's just not putting it all together the way he was, and he could be banged up again from playing Four Nations and not having a true break but, there's something else to it. I think there's some mental block happening here with him as well.
I noticed it for sure during the game, but it was more noticeable when they had the 6-on-4. He just
Yeah.
making bad plays. He's a key guy where he gets the puck up high, and he just was not making good decisions or was losing puck battles. So yeah, it's hard to say, but he definitely wasn't playing like himself.
Yeah, well, it will be interesting to see, how they react, against the Jets, who they just won against. We're gonna talk more about them on tomorrow's show, and see how they make adjustments from this game. But the trade deadline still marches on as we get closer to Friday. And some additional deals have taken place that may affect what the Flyers can do. We're going to talk about them coming up next.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you could stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you could even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app's easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. I would take the Celtics over the 76ers no matter what the line is. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
On tomorrow's show, we will be talking Flyers versus Jets Part 2. And do the Flyers need to make any adjustments? What adjustments will the Jets make, and how the Flyers going to deal with that back and forth? But the Flyers will have last change, so that is a good thing. We're going to continue our trade deadline conversation, and we're going to do a deal suggestion that one of y'all did coming up right in this segment. If you got another one, let us know, and we'll do that on tomorrow's show as well. Plus, we're going to continue our NHL draft prospect coverage and talk about Adam Benak, who is a small but feisty center that the Flyers might want to consider. So, as of recording this segment, kind of the latest trade deadline activity that could affect the Flyers and their ability to make a deal for Ristolainen or Laughton. Olli Mata signed an extension with Utah for 3 years. So he's one of the defensemen that was high on people's lists that's now off the table, right?
Right. So that, in a way, that helps the Flyers. I mean, I don't know if it makes Danny Briere lower his price, because I think that's ultimately the biggest reason that Risto won't get dealt is because of that. So, yeah, but, getting one off the market's never a bad thing. I think they overpaid for Mata, but Mata, he has a usefulness. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's a good bridge guy for them to get them while their prospects are developing, right?
Yeah. 3 years, I guess you can get away with that. Any longer, it's really not doing that. So yeah, I get you.
Right. And then there was that three-way contract trade yesterday that sent Trent Frederick to the Oilers that involved the Bruins and the Devils with some salary retention. The details, as far as the Flyers concerned, aren't important here, other than the fact that the highest pick in the deal was a second rounder for this year. Right. And that's essentially for Frederick, right? So that tells you what the market is.
Yeah, that tells you what the market is as far as giving away a first for this year's draft or next year's draft. So yeah, you can get a second for this year for sure. Because I shouldn't say a first for this draft, first for next year's draft. You can get a first for this year's draft, but they don't need it. But yeah, you can get a second, and I do think that points it out. And yeah, I like Frederick. I liked him when the Bruins drafted him. Bruins fans didn't like the pick because they were like, he's just this, he's just that. He's turned out to be a really useful player. So fine.
Yeah, and I think it's a good move for the Oilers heading into the playoffs for them right now.
Give him a little truculence.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the Laughton side of things, Jake Evans signed an extension with Montreal, so he's off the table.
Yeah, that's a big guy to be off the table. He won that negotiation against Ken Hughes. That's just the way it is. There's no way in my mind he didn't, because it was coming down to the wire. They were negotiating. They, were sort of close, and they gave him a fourth year. The term is always the killer. That's all I'll say. He's a good player, but I don't know where he's going to be in 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, as is always the case, there's still trade rumors out there about Risto and Laughton. I think the latest was the one we heard via Elliot Friedman, if you want to talk insiders here, that suggested that the negotiations with Toronto might involve both of them
No way.
in a
No.
big deal. I think, I don't think
No way.
that's likely here,
Because
but
Toronto is not going to give up like their top prospect for this. I know that
no,
that's what Danny would be angling for, but I don't think they're
right.
going to do that. And I don't think Danny's going to retain like 50%, which I think he'd have to, because I don't think Toronto has that kind of cap space. There'd have to be
Yeah, and
another team involved. It would seem to me.
yeah, and Danny's made it very clear that he has very specific prices that
Yes.
he's willing to pay and return that he's looking for. So
Right.
this potential
I could
big
see
deal
Laughton.
doesn't fit that.
Laughton makes sense.
By
That's
himself,
doable.
sure.
By himself.
Sure. Yeah, but, again, to be continued on that front. Meanwhile, Adam S. on Twitter made a suggestion for a Flyers Kings trade. Flyers and Kings are frequent trading
They are.
partners, as we well know. So it's a very good start to the premise here, and suggested that the Flyers send Rasmus Ristolainen to the Kings, Flyers retaining 20% of his a 5.1 salary. So that would be a 4.08 hit for the Kings in exchange for the 2025 second round pick and fifth round pick, or excuse me, and the second and fifth round pick that the Flyers have in excess here. And the Flyers in return would receive Brandt Clarke.
Yeah. So I just wrote something for NHLDraftBuzz.com, my site, and Brandt Clarke's on my untouchable list. But yeah, if the Flyers could get him, great. This would have to change, though, this trade. It would have to be a Flyers first rounder in this year's
With
draft.
Risto.
With Risto.
In exchange for Brandt Clarke.
And more retention, probably up to 50% for Risto. If the Flyers, whatever the Flyers could handle, that's basically what they would have to do. So a first, and instead of the second, it's a first instead of the second, and 50% retention. And I think he'd be in the ballpark, but I still don't think the Kings would do it, but you never know. I mean, there is talks. I mean, I think he's a 50, 60 point, maybe even 70 point, one or a two for the future in this league. And he has 25 already. And he probably, if he wasn't getting scratched, he'd probably end up with 45 easy this year. So yeah, I understand why the Flyers fan would want him, and sure, see if they could do it. Make a call.
Yeah, I think that price is very high, but you're right, the potential is also very high.
It's very high.
I don't know that Danny would want to retain that much
He's
salary
22.
that you're suggesting. No, I know. That's what I'm saying.
I'm
is
not
like
saying
that's
50% over the life of the contract. I'm saying 50% this year, because the cap's
maybe.
going up next year. I'm not saying over the
Maybe.
life of the contract.
Yeah, it's a tough one because, like you said, Brandt is 22. He's 6'2". He has all that potential. And the thing about him right now with the Kings is, you're right, he is getting healthy scratched. The Kings are 0-3 in their recent healthy scratching of Brandt Clarke. And he had a really good beginning to his season as far as production goes and as far as minutes go. They cut his minutes as the season went on. He went from about just under 19 a game to now just over 14 a game. His scoring is way
Yeah,
down.
it matters. All that stuff
And
matters.
yeah, and so the change of scenery factor is a big
Mhm.
one here, I think, in this proposal, because like the Kings don't know what to do with him right now. And especially since Drew Doughty returned, the pairings don't create
Sure.
an
For this
environment
year,
for him to find a spot this year. And I think that's what's going on this year. Now, I think you're right
Drew
in
Doughty's
terms
not
of
lasting much longer. That's my
no.
whole thing.
And that's the thing, is I think the Kings are just going to figure it out and hold on to him
Right.
until Doughty's gone.
Right.
But for now, it's kind of a mess. And so I
Yeah,
can
that's why you
see,
got to make a good offer. And I sweetened
yeah,
the offer. I lessened
yeah.
the overall retention over years, made it more for this year because you're getting a first. But I still think it would be something close to that.
Right. And I think that, would the Kings trade somebody else in order to make room for Brandt Clarke? Maybe.
Maybe if you don't
But
retain, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I just don't know. So like, because the Kings could trade Jordan Spence instead.
I don't
But
think they would.
I don't think
They
they
seem
would
to like
either.
him,
They
or the
could.
coach seems to like him. That's why I don't think that'll happen.
Yeah, I just don't know. Like
I know.
And Clarke is a young, cheap defenseman with a lot of promise. So, like, the thought of the Kings giving him up is a very hard pill to swallow,
It'd be
I
a
think.
very hard pill. They already gave up Brock Faber in a deal, and Fiala is a
Yeah.
good player, but he's not going to be as valuable as Brock Faber in the next year or two.
Yeah, I think so. So I think, like, let's pitch the Kings. I like the
Absolutely.
premise.
I do too.
I really like
The
the
bones
premise
of it
of
are
it.
there. I mean, I agree.
Yeah. It's just up the ante a little bit here for
Yeah.
the Kings, to
Got
your
to make it a
point.
little more palatable, easier for him for this year. The Flyers
Yeah.
had that, an extra first. They got to get rid of it.
Yeah,
Get rid
might
of
as
it.
well.
It's
Yeah,
fine.
and if you're gonna get a defenseman with high-end potential like
Mhm.
this, give up one of those give up the Edmonton first for it.
The,
Why
the
not?
Kings get Risto for the life of his contract, which helps their
Mhm.
playoff hopes for the next few years. Like,
Yep.
it's all possible.
Yep. Yeah, it is very possible. So, love that suggestion there from Adam. And we will potentially talk about other deals on the table. Send them our way. And we will do that. In the meantime, you also had other questions about the Flyers and the Phantoms. We are going to talk about those mailbag questions coming up next. So Rick sent us an email on Matvei Michkov and the Calder conversation, and he has a bit of an opposing viewpoint to what we've been saying about it doesn't really matter if
Mhm.
Michkov wins the Calder. And so Rick says the Flyers need Michkov to win the Calder Memorial Award. It sends the message to free agent offer sheet eligible centers in this league that they have a great chance to play here for the Flyers with a great up and coming talented winger and future star. It makes coming here more lucrative for those free agents. Benching Michkov and limiting his ice time will only hurt everything here.
Well, I agree with the premise and the final statement there, but the only thing is like the players know Mitchkov's really good, so if they want to play with him, they'll come over anyhow. I don't think the award is what's
Yeah,
necessary, but it wouldn't hurt. I mean, that's obvious, but it's a tough three race there with Celebrini and Hudson. Like, I saw odds today, and right now Mitchkov's third, and that's probably
right.
right where he should be at the moment. Now, if he keeps this pace up and Celebrini doesn't, which he kind of is, um, maybe it changes. But Lane Hudson's also a defenseman keeping up with these guys in points, so that matters too. So it's going to be hard. Listen, there's plenty of great players who have not won this award.
Right. And I think him being top 3, that's the
That's
award
it.
right
That's
there.
right. That
Like,
is
if he gets
getting
to go
noted.
to the well, I don't know if they're having the ceremony this year,
No, they're not.
but
They're
yeah, right.
not.
But just being on that
Yeah, just
graphic
being
from the
mentioned
NHL
is
is
great.
good enough for
It
me.
goes, it goes in Hockey Reference. Everybody says, "Hey, top 3 for Calder that year. He's in it."
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it's enough for him as well. So, yeah. Seamus asked us on YouTube, when Lawton eventually departs, should we give Noah Cates the A? He plays the exact way Philadelphia fans want their players to play. You don't have to be the best, you just have to give your best.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think he exemplifies it. He's on a somewhat long-term deal. I mean, a semi-long-term deal. Yeah, I would.
Yeah, and I think he's sticking around.
Yeah,
I unless there's a phenomenal deal that involves sending him the other way, I just
yeah,
don't see the Flyers parting with him.
yeah. Because actually, he's due for a deal, right? With Cates. Yeah,
Mhm.
and they're going to give him 4 years probably. So
I
that's
think
why I
so.
think it's good. That's where my brain went.
Yeah. So if they trade Lawton and eventually, because Lawton's older, he will
Yeah,
go away.
yeah.
Noah Cates is a great candidate for Flyers leadership
I
for
mean, we're
sure.
older. We're eventually going to go away too. I mean, just the way the world is.
Yes, that is true. Adam Hart on Twitter sent a DM saying, as a longtime Flyers fan since the 70s, I was happy to see the Phantoms come to Rockford. I'm an Ice Hogs season ticket holder and hope to see more crossover games like this. The game is great. The experience that the call ups for the Phantoms got showed on the ice against the Ice Hogs was great. Andrei is clearly an NHLer. He stands out. Also says, keep up the good work, and sent a really cool picture of the Phantoms versus Ice Hogs. And that is so cool that
Yeah,
you got to go to that game, and we think you are correct about Emil
we do.
Andre.
We think you're correct about Andre. It is. I haven't been to an Ice Hogs game, but I understand it's a good atmosphere there,
Yeah.
and it's a great hockey city, anyhow, as you know. So, yeah, I mean, just Chicago's great. Rockford's good though. I mean, Rockford had the Rockford Peaches too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, it's been a really good minor league
it has.
market for quite some time. So that is so much fun that you got to see the Phantoms play out there. On our draft prospect segment last week about Michael Misa, we had a couple of comments that were interesting related to that discussion. And, is he a candidate for the Flyers here if they could get that high of a pick? And so Michael said, I'd want Misa over Higgins. He's bigger and feels more dynamic, and no BC/NCAA worries there.
Wait,
Lucky
wait. So
me
that's
said,
like Jay. That's like
yeah,
Jay O'Brien worry. There's
yeah,
no similar worry here. Chris Kreider went to BC. How's his career been?
that's
Like,
true.
yeah,
That's true. That is very true. Lucky Me said, would the Flyers pass over Higgins to take Misa? Well, I wouldn't do it if I were GM. I believe they would. They already have a sub 6 foot center in Luchenko. I don't think they'd want to have their top line center under 6 feet tall.
I think he's probably right, but I wouldn't do it either. But I think he's probably right that there's a chance. I can't say it's definite, but I think there's a chance. Sure, yeah,
That they would
that they would.
pass
Yeah,
over Higgins.
yep,
Yeah. I think it is really interesting because, again, this is a giant if given where the Flyers
sure,
currently are, and they would have to move up to get him.
yes,
And in order to have this choice between Higgins and Misa, they would
right.
have to have the
Just getting
first
the choice
overall pick.
is yeah, is
Right.
some
I
would be
think if
something.
they have the second overall pick, the chances of this choice existing are pretty much none, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because nobody's taking somebody else besides these two, I think,
Right.
at
Well,
number
I
one.
mean, third pick because you can go Shaper,
But the
maybe
Flyers
someone.
can't get the third pick because if they move up, they can only move up
Oh yeah, the
one or
way it
two.
is at the
Yeah,
second pick. Yeah, I'd say the chances are lessened.
yeah,
Nothing's
yeah.
impossible, but I'd say it's lessened. Yeah, I forget
Right.
about the lottery math. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I think, you know, it's always hard to say. I think I would take Higgins when all
I
is
know
said
I
and done
would,
here,
and that's no
but
slighting of Misa. I know
right.
what Higgins is doing against the competition he's doing right now. I know he's going to continue to get stronger, and Misa's very dynamic, but Misa also I need to see what he could do against tougher competition, and that's going to come down the line. I'm already seeing what Higgins could do against tougher competition, so I don't have
Yeah,
that small person worry. It took it away. It took that away from me.
right. Right. And that's the difference here.
Yeah,
So I think it's a very interesting choice to have to make. I think, for me, I think back always because of the Nico Heischer, Nolan Patrick
yeah,
situation where the Flyers didn't have the choice in the
no.
conversation. And things turned out the way they turned out. And again, not Nolan Patrick's fault about the injuries at
I
all.
mean, if
It's
he
just
interviewed better, he probably would have gone to the Devils. That's the irony here.
maybe, maybe. But I just think that, like, the Flyers being in this situation in the we don't have a choice where there's an obvious number 2
Yeah,
when whoever goes first overall,
yeah,
the number 2 is obvious. I
like
I
a
would hate to
Taylor
see the
Tyler situation.
yeah, I just don't like, I would hate for the Flyers to be in that boat again because I feel like the emotional baggage is too much
Well,
for
you
it,
could put
but I
JVR in
would
that
rather
baggage
have
too. That's why.
yeah, absolutely, and that's why I think, like, would I want the Flyers to have the second overall pick? Yes. Would there be trauma associated with it? Also, yes.
Absolutely.
So, it would be kind of funny, but, yes, would love to have the choice between the 2, though. That is for sure. Tom Servo commented, "The Flyers need to tap into the European talent pool more by acquiring better European scouts. The Flyers have not developed a European player that's contributed much over the past 10 years." And I think that's partially true. Now, Matvei Michkov is European. Let's
Right.
put that out there.
Yes.
But that being
But that's
said,
an easy one. Like, I don't think it
right.
took a lot of talent for anybody to say he's a great player.
Right. So I think in terms of developing talent, I think they've traded some guys that maybe if they held on to, I think, you look at Oscar Lindblom, that's unfortunate
He was developed, though.
circumstances. He was developed. Yeah. So I think there's been some weird
But there's more
circumstances
misses than
around it.
hits, and I think that's what
Yeah.
he's getting
No,
at,
that's true.
and I
That's true.
agree. I mean, Abels was a good signing. I don't know if it's a long-term solution for anything, but it was a good signing.
Right. But that's not a draft and
It's not a
develop.
drafted. I mean, Berglund looks like he could be that,
Hmm.
and so Berglund's a good one to kind of throw in there. So yeah, I think I look. Sammy Kapanen's doing that, and he hasn't been doing it that long. I don't know what they'll get out of this draft in it, but we'll look at it over the summer and kind of see who those players could be, because that's a legit worry.
Yeah, I think so, but it's an absolutely fair point and a good one to bring up, and that's why we're talking about European prospects
Yeah.
on our draft segments like Adam Benek
Yep.
on tomorrow's show. So stay tuned for that, as well as the latest with the trade deadline and so much more. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. You can send in your mailbag questions or Flyers thoughts to any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, also on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.